All right, welcome back to the Modern Revolution. I'm glad you're joining us for another one of our great conversations. As you know, we bring people on, and these people are multifaceted. They've done a lot of things. They're really fascinating human beings. But we don't spend time giving you their resume and sort of explaining why they're an authority. Instead, we ask you to listen to them and to pay careful attention to what they have to say. And then, if you are sufficiently intrigued, then we'll give you ways to learn more about them. But today, we really just want you to listen and see if it's something that intrigues you that you will learn more in the future. Today, we have Dr. Ravi Iyer, and thank you very much for spending time with us. So, Doctor, appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure here.
So, Doctor, we like to start with just trying to understand the problem you're trying to solve in the world. And so, give you a chance to certainly expound upon it, but in a succinct way, briefly, could you describe what problem are you trying to solve out there in the world?
My life work as a physician for 40 years has been the empowerment of people. And it's come out of a passion to understand life. That's what has driven me since I was a small boy. I've always been fascinated by life. What makes life work? How do you make life work when it doesn't work?
Hmm.
And so that's what my life has been about. And the events of the last 3 to 4 years have been predominantly focused on multiple facets of society that challenge this fundamental premise of my life.
Okay.
And so it really crystallized during the pandemic, where I saw that the virus was just the representation of a deeper malaise that afflicted the world around me, not
Okay.
just in the US, but also globally.
Hmm.
And I felt that uh, I felt that the things that we did in the clinic to keep our patients safe carried within it a kernel of a deeper message that I felt was valuable for the rest of society to hear.
Okay.
So that crystallized and metamorphosed into a book. And then it evolved from there into a platform where I started talking about those principles and expounding upon it. And it actually goes far beyond just staying safe from a viral disease.
Right.
Uh, it goes into the very essence of the being of human beings. And that is, in essence, is what I'm about.
So, I mean, let's just pause there, and I'm interested in the principles that that you want to talk about. But I'm curious. It seems to me kind of two things are true: is that you understood early in your life that you wanted to empower people. You're interested in human beings' health and empowering them to be, I presume, like the best version of themselves. But it also and you would have to incrementally move along that journey. You need a certain amount of education, you need a certain amount of experience. You have 40 years of professional experience. However, the road to beginning that 40 years certainly required steps one, two, three, and however many. Um, but it also sounds like there was an epiphany, and that in this long journey of continuous interest in empowering people, um, in the midst of certainly a global cataclysm, and however you might like to describe these last couple of years, something occurred to you that might not have occurred to you in the past. Is that true? I mean, could I ask a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, Actually, a series of epiphanies, rather, but
Okay.
cumulative over the years. So nothing. So there is always both darkness and light in the manifestation of a soul.
Okay.
So in my life, my passion for life, my passion to understand life, that was an inherent drive that I was born with.
Okay.
I did not. It just attracted me.
Hmm.
So like that, I found this passion very early. But coupled with that was, in my formative years, was an early exposure uh, uh, to scholastic accolades.
Okay.
Then there followed a period of being exiled into scholastic barren desert,
Right.
where I ruined my life and did not, you know, failed very, very badly. And to the extent that I even after I got selected into some of the best, finest medical schools in the country, I could not go because I did not have the basic degree, the basic level of scores in my basic degree to even attend the entrance, the interview,
Okay.
selection interview. So uh, so I relegated myself um, uh, to the backwoods of medical education. I was fortunate to get into a medical school, but it was not the top notch.
Okay.
Uh, and being born in a family of very high performing people,
Right.
um, I the status of being a black sheep, at least in my eyes, I was a black sheep,
Okay.
and a sense that I had failed my parents, uh, and my parents obviously were deeply distressed to see their star son suffer like this,
Okay.
and I would experience their distress about my life as uh, an increase on my self-doubt and so on. So all
Sure.
of that pushed me deeper and deeper into driving myself towards my first passion, which
Okay.
was I'm going to understand what life is all about.
Okay.
And I withdrew from society for a period of 9 years,
Okay.
and went into a deep solitary exile where I did nothing except study.
Wow.
Um, mm, I isolated myself away from all the people who were judging my progress,
Okay.
and and took myself to a poor part of society where there was no education being done, and I decided to educate the the fallen, literally. in
Okay.
my in my medical school there was a lot of criminal gang elements, and
In the medical school?
yeah.
Oh my
they
goodness. Now
they,
where was it, just so that way we can
it,
locate
it,
this
it,
school in the world, like just at least psychologically. Where is
It
this
was it
gang
was
ridden?
it, it was in Bihar. I mean, the dorm environment was overrun by gangs.
Oh my goodness.
So and they were segregated by caste and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So I decided that I would start. It started by, I actually talk about it in my book.
Right.
I there was a senior gang member who was persistently failing, and I helped him pass the exam. I taught
Okay.
him and he passed the exam. So the next time the gang leadership got together and they decided that Iyer was too valuable a commodity to be relegated to one gang member. So I was given a small group of scribes, and
Okay.
I was given a room and I could conduct classes, and
Okay.
I started teaching. And I was teaching way above my grade. I was in my first year and second year,
Right.
and I was teaching third and fourth years. So I would read up those books, and then I would come and teach.
Okay.
And I would teach. And because I was teaching, the word spread all over the campus that hands off Iyer. No one touches him. No one touches him. Like, so I had this miraculous bulletproof armor. I could walk
Okay.
wherever I wanted, and
Yes.
I was safe.
Dr.
And
Iyer, is it just me, or is the medical school environment in Bihar very unique? I don't know.
it is
Having,
unique.
I would, I,
It is like having a medical school in the middle of Taliban. I mean,
okay, okay,
like
wow,
yeah. So
So
Yeah, it
through
is.
now, okay, let me just locate this is this prior to, or is this what you mean about your 9 years
It was
of
9 years.
okay, so within these 9 years, um, you were
Yeah.
serving those that might not, I mean, people might be intimidated or not being interested in helping these people, but you were not intimidated. You
No,
went
I
and
did it as a matter of survival, and
okay, okay,
I suddenly realized that uh, knowledge is really supreme power.
interesting.
And I had found I had accidentally discovered that I, in the midst of real criminal elements, I
Okay.
could create an oasis of
Hmm.
sanctuary, a sanctuary where the light of knowledge, and because I possessed that ability to teach,
Hmm.
uh, I was not only safe, I could keep people safe in my sanctuary.
That's interesting.
And in this, and because I had the one element that they could not get for themselves, and I was not hoarding it for myself, I
Right.
decided I'll give it out freely to all takers
Okay.
who are willing to come. And because of that, I discovered something else, that to rule, you don't need to be king.
Okay.
You don't need to be Tsar. You
Right.
just need to be Rasputin. You just need to be the power behind the throne.
Okay.
And that suddenly informed um, a strategy that served me well through the rest of my life.
So
I
just to paraphrase what I heard, so I'm following you properly. I mean, so we're earlier in the conversation we talk about your passion to empower people. And then in the midst of this experience, you end up empowering those that have on one hand a lot of power because there's must be violence amid this
Yes,
criminality, there's threat, there's you know these people have the power to disrupt, and yet you're finding a way in which you're empowering them on a different track. So you're empowering them to learn because presumably they're undertaking the discipline of medical school for a reason.
yes,
So in the midst of this, you're empowering these people there. Is that a fair understanding of what you just said?
yes, yes.
Okay.
So the bottom line was all, and I discovered something else essential about human beings, and that is human beings, like every other creature on the planet, they operate to better their state. They
Right.
are always looking, how can I better myself? How can I
Okay.
better my lot in life?
Right.
And I've discovered one new facet of what I call prime directives or core principles
Okay.
of sentient existence.
Okay.
And that is, life by nature is unpredictable.
Yes.
And from the lowest amoeba to the human being, every creature
Hmm.
lives trying to get a little extra handle and try to predict what is likely to happen in the next 5 minutes of life.
Yes.
The tiger is looking to predict where the deer is going to appear.
Right.
The deer is trying to
Yes.
predict where the tiger is going to appear.
Right.
And if either of them lose their prediction, one loses its life, one loses its meal.
Right.
So in both cases, there is a cost. Forget about the disproportionate element of the cost, but
Yes.
there's always a cost that is meaningful to that creature.
Yes.
Like that, all human beings also are looking to better their circumstance by trying to be in a position where they can be of advantage, they can gain an advantage for themselves.
Yes.
And I had discovered at this point in my life, and I was 20, I was 19.
Okay.
I was 19. In India, you can go to medical school very quickly. I was
Okay.
16 when I finished high school, and I
Okay.
was 19 and I entered medical school.
Right.
So, um, so the at 19, I discovered that the essence of life is this need to predict,
Right.
and that learning is being done only for this prediction capacity.
Okay. Okay.
People are learning only so that they can predict
That's
and better
interesting. Yeah.
and can better their life.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I learned at side by side with this.
Okay.
I learned that life presents as an experience, but this desire to predict, because we have this desire to not be surprised by life, we want
Yes.
to gain an advantage, we want to know exactly what's going to happen before it happens,
Right.
and therefore we try to get a head start by creating a snapshot of our experience and filing it away in memory. And then when life presents itself, we take the snapshot, a part of our brain immediately compares it and say,
Yes.
oh, which part of my prior experience does
Yes.
this experience? And we immediately pull whatever worked in that
Yes.
past
Right.
experience and try to apply it to this one.
Right. Yeah. And that's what you're talking about being able to predict, because if it worked in the past, we have an assumption that it will work in the future. So,
Correct.
okay.
So there's a huge advantage to that. It gives you a predetermined set of responses that you can automatically fire off from the hip
Yes.
without thinking,
Right.
which about 80% of the time will probably hit the mark
At least for some period of time, right? Because
for
I
some
think,
period of time.
yes, because I think over time, part of the things that people get disadvantaged, right, is that the circumstances change, but the model is the same.
Model is the same, and you misread an
Yes.
apparent resemblance into a
Yes.
real resemblance. So this is what I learned,
Okay.
that we have two aspects to our consciousness. And at 20, I recognized this, that we have experience
Yes.
and we have a narrative.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the majority of people live their life in the narrative.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And in this way, they become more and more fossilized and more divorced from experience.
Because they're insisting on fitting the experience into the narrative. Is that more or
Yes,
less okay?
yes. And they live in the narrative and they forget to actually experience. And everything that we really value, freedom, happiness, joy,
Right.
satisfaction, sense of accomplishment, sense of purpose,
Yes.
passion, love, is never in the narrative, it's always in the experience.
That's interesting.
And we this is the reason why two people meet, they fall in love. In the first 3 years, they are totally in the experience, but while they are in the experience, each one is forming a narrative about that experience, and they
Yes.
begin to live more and more in the narrative, and in this way they go further and
Yes.
further apart.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then they look and say, well, why is the magic gone?
Right.
And then they think, oh, we have fallen out of love. They never discovered love in the first place. They never discovered how to stay in the experience.
Yes.
So the so as I started developing myself to be a physician, I started recognizing that the disease had two aspects to it.
Right.
That people were coming to me with the experience of a discomfort caused by a biological ailment,
Right.
and then they had a narrative about the discomfort.
Okay.
And that I, as a physician, had dual roles. I had to address the narrative as well as the experience.
Yes.
And many times I found that if I just changed the narrative, I would change the experience too.
Yes. That's so interesting, right? Because that calls into question, what is the experience? Because if the narrative is stronger than the experience in certain instances, right? I mean, because if somebody has something physically wrong, or they are infected with something, and yet the narrative shift adjusts their relationship to that injury, to that infection, then it begs the question, like, which one are they co-equal, or is one stronger than the other? That's
For
an interesting idea to me.
very often, the physical experience is actually only a small portion
Okay.
for most adults.
Right. Yes.
For children, it's the other way around.
Yes. Yes.
For children, it is the physical experience that comprises the bulk of their experience.
Right.
Their narrative about it they have not yet developed a deep enough library of narratives,
Yes.
a large enough repertoire of narratives,
Right.
such that the narratives dominate their experience.
Right. Such the expression can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Because the children have not fossilized into these series and set of
Correct.
narratives, and they are therefore the better learners in many instances, right?
Yes. Yeah, but they learn only to become fossilized. So
Yes, right.
the thing is, so so there are two aspects to this development. One is what I was bringing to my work,
Right.
and the other is what I was taking home with me to my privacy for my inner work.
Okay.
And in my inner work, I was always working on how do I control the narrative and not let it dominate my experience.
Yes.
Because as long as I'm able to do that, I can stay powerful and be able to contribute meaningfully to the people who come to me as prisoners of their narratives.
Yes.
And in this way, I became fluent over 40 years of work.
Okay.
I became very fluent and skilled at dancing between narrative and experience, and not only dancing myself, but also conducting people in this dance, and in this way, give them a taste of liberation.
Okay. So you have this long you've it's interesting. 9 years of relegation to, you know, the discipline of study is a long period of time, and especially as a young person, that presupposes an imagination that says this amount of discipline produces things in the future that I can't see right now. It's an act of faith in my mind.
No, actually, I was upset that people thought poorly of me. And I just decided I didn't have this idea that I was going to become something.
Right.
I just decided that to hell with them. I'm just going to go and focus on what
Okay.
is meaningful to me. And what is
Okay.
meaningful was my desire to learn about life. And I sat there and I just lost myself there. And
So the
in this
experience
process,
dominated it, right? So is that
yes,
in those
yeah,
9 years, the narrative did not form
I
in the
stayed away from the narrative because
you
the
s-
narrative was actually disempowering me.
yes, right. So you were closer to the experience of that. But then you develop a framework to bring to the world that, hey, there's experience and narrative, and those things can sometimes be at cross purposes to an empowered human being. And you spend 40 years working on yourself and figuring out how do I work in my own life for that, and then using your knowledge and wisdom with your patients is kind of what I'm hearing. Is that
Yes.
yeah.
So,
It-
so, because, there's no richer arena to learn and do self-discovery than working with people.
yes.
Because they come, I mean, I'm enormously indebted to the people who came with their problems to me, because I learned from every one of them.
Right.
Um, and there's a great degree of humility that you need to approach a person with an ailment.
Right.
They are literally suffering for you to become a better person.
Yes.
So in this process, I suddenly discovered, and all of that brought me further. Each step was dovetailing, almost as if that there was a mission going forward.
Okay.
And at some point, I recognized that there's only one purpose in life, and that is to help people get empowered such that they can experience without being a slave of their narratives.
Okay.
Then our narratives are given to serve as a tool.
Right.
Instead, we make it our masters.
Okay.
And that is, in essence, my message for people.
Right. So when we talk about the crystallization that occurs in the last few years, I mean, what refinement occurs in that crystallization from this long history of doing this work? What is the? It sounds like these are a series of epiphanies, but it sounds like there were important epiphanies as of late. How would you describe the most recent of these epiphanies and how it's changed your work and you?
So there is at the superficial level, um, we have the business, the pandemic, and the actual uh, challenges that why the pandemic arose in the first place. And it came, I mean, it's now becoming very evident that it came out because human beings
Yeah.
did the research in a very unsafe manner.
Hmm.
And that is becoming well established. So part of my immediate superficial work is to raise a public dialogue on biosafety and biosecurity. And I belong to an organization, the American Association for Biosafety and Biosecurity, where I'm a member in that and I volunteer and so on and so forth.
Right.
So, so I part of this book and part of the podcast is all about trying to raise public awareness, because this pandemic is only the first of several more that are likely to come in our horizon, and it is coming out. And we need, as a human race, we need to be far more competent in the way we do this research.
Okay.
Pandemic grade research cannot be stopped. It will be done.
Okay.
The problem is not that it is being done. The problem is it is being done without appropriate safeguards in place.
Okay.
And so my thrust is that we need to have appropriate oversight and safeguards. And right now, none exists globally.
Okay. That's terrifying.
All, yes, yes, because right now, Hiroshima and Nagasaki produced 250,000 deaths, and you have the International Atomic Energy Commission, and with full enforcement capability to oversee nuclear work in every country in the globe, such that if they don't subject themselves to oversight,
Right.
you'll shut their economy down.
Yes.
But you had a pandemic that produced 25 million dead, and you have absolutely no control over any of the labs that are doing it. Every lab
Yeah. Yes.
is doing its own self-policing.
Yeah.
Each university is doing its own self-policing,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of conflict of interest because universities are interested in the grant money, and if they find that there's a leak or lack of safety in the way it is being done, they are going to gloss over it rather than. And so there's no external agency that is capable of walking in and doing a sudden audit.
Right. Right.
With all those things need to be placed not only nationally but internationally also.
Okay.
So there's a whole need for that. Then comes at the psychological level. I saw the terror that people had about the loss of. Uh, so the one thing that the pandemic did was it made your life unpredictable. Your
Yes.
very
Right.
breath,
Yes. Yeah.
your breath became toxic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Human beings are connected. We are
Right.
a connected species, and the common things of connection, a hug, a kiss, sitting 3 feet away from each other and
Yeah.
talking face to face, all of that was a harbinger of a lethal disease. Then the fabric of human society started falling apart, and the real this whole business of being unable to predict where your life is going to go in the next few moments became scarily in your face. And when
Yes.
people started uh, became confronted with their own mortality, their own ability to stay grounded started falling apart. So at a deeper level, I was able to create a nucleus of a safe sanctuary for my team, and extend that to all the patients who came. And then I realized that if I can do that here through my conversation about experience and narrative and showing people
Hmm.
the physical steps
Yes.
as well as the psychological steps to regain balance,
Right.
then how can I take that dialogue further? So at the end of the pandemic, I realized that 40 years I've been doing this job one-on-one, one patient at a time.
Yes.
And I felt that at 65, I said, I'm going to do my second act. And my second act is
Yeah.
I'm going to take this to a larger platform. I can't spend my time teaching this one person at a time. I'm going to have to spend it, try to get the message out to a larger audience.
So I'm curious, as you know, as you've refined and I thank you, by the way, for the work you're doing in terms of biosafety, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for the work that you're doing in biosafety, because the notion that the world has not quickly moved to implement what you're talking about is interesting and scary at the same time. I mean, the Atomic Energy Commission, we have these dramatic events that have happened in the past that spurred all of this, but we're in the face of something, multiple of those dramatic events, and
Yes.
we've been slow to that. But I wanted to ask a question about tension that might exist between you and people you talk to about this framework. When somebody might disagree with this framework of experience and narrative being like a dominant way to view the world, what assumptions does that person have typically to disagree with this model? Like, is you when you're in the you're challenging assumptions that people have to have them think differently. What assumptions make people less willing? Where they're understanding, where the help you would give them, what are their own assumptions that get in the way of you being able to help them?
So the two essential ingredients for embracing this is vulnerability and
Yes.
insight. And the opposing force is fear
Yes.
and safety.
Mm,
So there are going to be different people who have varying needs for safety and who have varying degrees of fear at being challenged. So narratives offer safety.
yes.
They offer safety at the cost of your liberty.
Right. Right. Yes.
So the safety they offer is the prison of your concepts.
Mm,
What they extract from you is life itself. And it doesn't feel as if they are extracting life, because what they give in return for that safety is a little semblance of life, a little dribs and drabs of life.
right.
What they give you is splendor, not sugar.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So the taste of splendor or artificial
Yes.
sweetness
Yes.
is
Yes.
what you get. And the what I am showing is I'm telling people that there is a way to live life without rejecting your narrative, but holding narrative in abeyance, holding narrative at an arm's length,
Right.
and dabbling in experience.
Yes. Yes.
So instead of saying, hey guys, throw away narrative, I tell people narratives are important. They are
Right.
valuable tools, but hold them as tools. Don't make them your master.
Yes. Yeah. So in a sense, when we talk about predictability, if you're predicting a small life, a small set of experiences, and you deliver on that smallness to yourself, well, it's predictable, but it doesn't allow for the largeness, for the banquet, for the cornucopia, pick your metaphor for a life full of amazing things. You got to trade your ability to predict something small, splenda, and allow for the possibility that there is sugar out there that you will just be blown away by what could happen. So it sounds to me like the assumptions that are being challenged are an assumption that the experience I've created for myself is the only experience I in fact can have. And what you're suggesting is that a different way of thinking, a different way of behaving opens up
So
something more. Is that fair or no?
we are all creators, you, me, we are all creating.
Yes.
Uh, we can create powerfully or we can create minimally. We don't,
Yes.
you don't have a choice about being a creator.
Yeah. Yes.
You
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
choice only
On
about the
what you create.
scale of your creation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so beautiful. Yeah. I love that.
So you know, mm, I you know, my my father was uh, my son when he was about 6 or 7 years old was being fed his dinner by my father, and so grandfather grandson they're having their moment when my father said he gave him a problem in math. He said, um, how about you imagine that you have so much money and that you give away all your money except one and keep only $1.
Okay.
So how much money do you want to begin with and how much do you want to give away?
Right.
So my son asked, what do I can imagine the money? I said, yeah, imaginary money. So he said, I imagine I have $1 million and I'm giving away 909, $999,999.
Okay.
So my dad said, why did you choose $1 million? It's imaginary money. I want to imagine how much money I want to give away.
Right.
So why imagine small?
Yes.
So my father came and told me this. He says, this boy is going to do great things. He wants to imagine, but he doesn't want to imagine small. He
Right.
wants to imagine big.
Yes. Yes.
Even when he has to give away all of it and
Yes.
leave himself with only $1, he
Right.
wants to give away big. And
Yes.
it's an imaginary giving, so it doesn't hurt him to imagine. And he has already discovered that
Yes.
imagination doesn't hurt.
Yes.
So some people are gifted like that boy.
Right.
Some people have to learn it. But
Right.
we are all creators.
Yeah.
Why limit yourself to
Why
small
limit? I love
creations?
it. Yeah. I mean, we get one shot here, the further along we go, the briefer it looks, and so
Yeah.
there's no sense in limiting it. And we have so many, I mean, we could go on for hours and days about all of the things that you're talking about. So let me ask you to maybe give some ideas to the people listening about small incremental things that they might do to move in the direction that you're encouraging people to move them. What are some things that somebody listening might say? What small things might you tell them to consider or perhaps do even?
So I want to give people a metaphor for life,
Yes.
which they can use as a mental model to start practicing a technique that will allow them to gain skill in separating experience from their narrative.
Right. Okay.
The metaphor is that of a cyclone or a hurricane.
Okay.
So life is like a sensory cyclone. See, our five senses constantly gets a barrage of stimulation,
Right.
and our brain processes that into narratives.
Right.
And this narrative is constantly spinning around you. But in the center of that narrative is the actual experience.
Right.
And in the experience, there is no narrative. There is just pure silence of experience.
Okay.
Like if you take a grain of sugar and put it, and
Yes.
you spend your time focusing all your awareness on that sugar, you
Right.
will suddenly not have all the narrative about sweetness. You'll have a different
Yeah.
experience.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Most people are not aware. They are
strangers to experience. They have forgotten what it is to taste, what it is to
Yeah.
smell, what
Right.
it is to touch, what it is to see,
Yes.
what it is to hear. We are hearing, when we hear, we are hearing our own voice telling us about what we are hearing.
Right.
When we are seeing, we are seeing our own brain construct the image about what we are seeing.
Yes.
And we have forgotten that. We have not practiced it. So the easiest way to gain experience, it is like learning to balance on a bicycle. Initially
Right.
you will go from side to side, and
Yes.
then the oscillations will become less, and then
Yes. Yes.
suddenly you will balance, and eventually you will balance and take your hands off
Yeah.
the handle, and you're still balanced. Or you're going down Kill Devil Hill, and you're still
Right.
in control.
Yes.
So as you go through this, the easiest way is to sit in a position of comfort in a place where it's relatively free from sensory distractions,
Right.
and pay attention to your own breath as it
Yes.
goes
Yes.
in and as it flows out, and just ride the tide of your breath with attention only on that.
Yes.
And as you do that, you will have random thoughts that will come up and grab your
Sure.
attention and take you away. And sometimes you'll go away, and then you'll suddenly catch yourself. Oh, what was I doing? I forgot. I was watching my breath. I'll come
Yes.
back to
Yes.
this. And as you go along the way, you will get more and more skill. Now, I've been doing this from the age of 17,
Right.
but so you're not going to get it immediately.
Right.
But as you get better, it takes about 5 to 6 years.
Right.
But as you get better, just 15 minutes a day,
Yes.
as you get better and better, you will find yourself being able to have the safe space to retreat into in the midst
Yeah.
of the
Yes.
storm of life.
Right. Right.
And then later, right in the with your hands in life, you will still be rooted in the safe space.
Yes.
And at that moment, you can see the narrative, and you can choose which narrative you want to give power to.
Right.
And at that point, you actually control narrative,
Yeah.
your narrative. Later, when you control your narratives, you can choose which narratives you want to present. And sometimes you will be gifted a platform to give narratives to the rest of the people
Yes.
around you.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's how it is.
It's interesting. I'm a jujitsu athlete, and I actually have a jujitsu podcast called the Jujitsu Mindset. But that notion of like being able to move and make decisions in the midst of being uncomfortable, in the midst of pressure, is to move the decision in my mind from the amygdala or the lizard brain, whatever we might like to call that, to the executive function. But that process can only occur in a moment of calm. And so I often find that those physical expressions of like being under threat, I mean, in jujitsu
Yes,
as an athlete,
it shuts off the narrative.
it does. You have you have to be in the moment, because if not, someone's going to choke you or whatever, right? So it does force that. And it also creates an opportunity in a safe space to do a version of what you're saying with the breath. It's that, to observe, am I making a choice
Yes.
or am I reacting? And the people who are able to make the best choices in jujitsu are the best jujitsu athletes. And so,
Yeah.
it's an interesting, I think, corollary to what you're saying. And the more that someone would meditate, my opinion is that they will be struck by the entertainment that their own mind will present to them. Because the more you can recognize that your thoughts, what's the expression, like meditation, it's not what you think, that your mind is going to serve up to you so many different things, and that you can discipline it to recognize, oh, this thought's arising, and and then it's dissipating, and have a little distance between the real-time formation of narrative and then the experience of observation is interesting to me.
Yes.
Well, I want to do two things as we come to the conclusion of the conversation. And the first one, we steered away at the beginning from a very long list of accomplishments that has been a part of your life, but I do like to have an opportunity for guests to tell us in the midst of their, many accomplishments, is there something that stands out as an accomplishment that your identity values more than others? And many of us say our family, and that's, it certainly makes sense to all of us. But beyond, our roles as fathers and husbands and whatnot, is there something that's happened in your life where you might like somebody when they think of you to think of this particular thing? And it may be something in the future, because as you say, you've had, 40 years of that, however you might title that act, and now you're on to the I'm sure it's not just the second act, it's probably act number whatever. But is there something that in your previous accomplishments that you particularly would want someone to know about?
Um, I've been blessed in many ways. I mean, I've had gifts given to me and accolades that most people don't get.
Yes.
So the real thing that I'm really blessed by is my ability to transform the experience of people.
Yes.
And that is the real blessing that I have.
Yes.
And I am not even sure it's an accomplishment, because there are many times I feel that I should be paying for that privilege.
Yeah. How nice.
Life has only one purpose, and that is to find out how you can contribute and then work to make it happen. That's all.
Yes. Yes.
There's no other purpose for life.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed to be able to do that. So that is, if you want to call it an accomplishment,
Yeah.
the accomplishment is to find that is my blessing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
poetic and profound. My mom is a poet, and in having an artist as a parent is,
Yeah.
she was a professor for many years. She's someone who had like this artistic impulse and this academic discipline, and so I got a chance to learn how your artistic impulses disciplined by like an academic experience can produce things differently than if you just have one or the other. And when I listen to you, you say that, I think understanding in the first principle of what we're here for can produce such beautiful fruit, because now you spend your energy in a way that is
Yeah.
in that direction. There's a lot of things you've said that we barely have scratched the surface on any of it. You've been so good at like being able to distill these things down in a way that we can understand them quickly and absorb them. But there are people out there who are going to want to learn more deeply about these ideas and about you, and perhaps ways they can engage in your platforms. Could you tell us a little bit about how people can find you?
Oh, yeah, I have a website. It's just www.driyer.com, driyer.com.
Yes.
And you can go there. It's a catch-all website, because I do a lot of things. I'm a director of research. I
Yes.
run an active practice. I write books. I talk. So this one website contains all of the stuff that I do.
Okay.
So it becomes a convenient spot to go, and if you want to message me, you can message me there,
Okay.
and I always respond.
Okay.
So, and you can follow all my talks, my podcasts, over there. It's easy to.
Okay. So from that one place, we can come and find all the various different ways to learn
Yes,
about you and to engage with you that way. Well,
absolutely. Yes.
Dr. Iyer, I'm so happy that you chose to spend some time with us. You're very generous in your disposition and the way that you shared all the things you did today with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Well, today's modern revolutionary, Dr. Ravi Iyer, is moving all of us forward. He's out there working not just for himself; he's out there working for all of us, and um, blessing us with his wisdom and the benefit of his experience. And so, I hope that it's inspirational to you, not just in what you've learned today, but empowering to you to go and bring your own work to the world, and to not hide that away, because the modern revolution needs us all.